Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of This Week in Magic Online Finance. Thank you so much for joining me here yet again, and as always, let's get started with the news. Now, the biggest story of this week, of course, is that we now know the full contents of Theros Beyond Death, and I've got to say I'm pretty impressed with the overall power level. I'm not sure how much of an impact the set's going to make beyond Standard, and there don't appear to be any totally busted planeswalkers in the vein of Teferi or Oko, but nearly every rare and mythic in the set looks like it has at least a shot of making an impact in competitive Magic. Not that every rare and mythic in the set will make an impact, of course, that would be ridiculous, but there simply aren't that many useless filler cards in this set. WotC is getting better at printing situationally powerful rares and mythics, and for our purposes, I'll be interested to see how many of them end up making a splash in one of the Eternal formats. We talked at length about Heliod Sun-Crowned and Underworld Breach last week, so let's take a look at a couple of other Theros Beyond Death cards that might show up in either Modern or Pioneer. Remember, Standard play doesn't matter as much on MTGO, so our goal is to find the best cards for the formats that are financially relevant here on Magic Online. I've still got my eye on Heliod, of course, but I expect it'll be joined by at least a couple of other partners in crime from this set. First up, we've got Thassa's Oracle, the new 2-mana Laboratory Maniac variant. Now, you do need to actually cast Thassa's Oracle to win the game instead of simply having it on the battlefield while you mill yourself out, but it's also just 2 mana instead of 3, and you don't need to fully empty your library to win the game. Now, I fully expect Thassa's Oracle to enhance a couple of decks in Legacy and possibly Modern as well, and I'm not alone in thinking that. Folks bought out Hermit Druid in Paper Magic under slightly suspicious, perhaps insider tradey circumstances due to its interaction with this card. So, at the very least, I'd take a look at the existing Lab Maniac decks online and snag whatever cards you don't have if you're excited to give Thassa's Oracle a whirl over the next couple of weeks. These cards are going to get more popular and gain value once Thassa's Oracle is actually available to purchase on Magic Online, and I haven't seen any secondary spikes yet, so you can kind of go nuts right now. Speaking of blue, I'd also take a look at Thassa's Intervention, a card that hasn't actually gotten that much hype in Standard yet, much less in Pioneer. But I think people are sleeping pretty hard on Thassa's Intervention. We all know that blue-based control decks are fantastic in Pioneer right now, and this is the exact sort of card that those decks want. You can have this in hand and pass with mana up, allowing you to either counter a threat if they play something, or draw cards if they don't. And this flexibility more than makes up for the mana cost, so I expect Thassa's Intervention to become a staple in Pioneer Azorius Control, as well as various Standard decks. Let's move on now to Gaining Ground, where the biggest gainer of the week in Pioneer was Liliana the Last Hope, surging 11 tickets from 15 up to 26. Now, believe it or not, Liliana was actually higher than this in recent weeks, peaking around the 30 ticket mark in early November. This latest spike appears to be a return to those levels, largely as a result of Liliana starting to appear in some mono-black aggro and mono-black vampires lists. She's far from default in both of those decks right now, but it doesn't take much for a powerful and scarce card like Liliana to spike. Remember, this was a card that broke the 40 ticket mark several times in both 2017 and 2018, so 26 tickets is still a relative bargain for Liliana the Last Hope. Liliana wasn't the only black card to gain significant ground in Pioneer this week. Kalidas, Trader of Get, also continued to rebound, surging 10 more tickets from 16 back up to 26. Kalidas was actually as high as 33 tickets before the Smuggler's Copter ban, and its recent surges due to mono-black aggro's resurgence in the wake of Oko leaving the format. Now, mono-black continues to be a strong choice in Pioneer, but I'm seeing signs that both of these cards have either peaked or are pretty close to peaking. Kalidas' price chart actually has dropped a bit since late last week, while Liliana's gains have fully plateaued. Now, I wouldn't panic sell my Kalidas or Liliana right now, but I also wouldn't expect any further immediate gains. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if both of these cards settle down a bit and even shed a few tickets over the next week or two. The other hot Pioneer deck on MTGO right now is Azorius Control. Both Supreme Verdict and Teferi Hero of Dominaria spiked this week, with Supreme Verdict surging 6 tickets from 5 up to 11, and Teferi jumping 5 tickets from 5 up to 10. Now, both of these cards had seen initial price spikes up to pretty close to these values back in late December, but then the price immediately tanked as extra copies flooded the market. It turns out that Azorius Control is pretty legit in Pioneer though, and those losses were totally negated this week thanks to these spikes. Don't be surprised if a few of Azorius Control's other key cards spike next, with Torrential Gearhulk and Gideon Ally of Zendikar being two of the likelier candidates. I'm already seeing their price charts getting a little bit frisky, and we could be talking about them on next week's Gaining Ground. Just keep in mind that these gains will all be somewhat restrained by the fact that Teferi Time Raveler is still a 55 ticket card, and you still need a full playset of those to play this deck. Now, that didn't stop Verdict or the big Teferi from doubling in price this week, but none of these cards have the upside of, say, Kalidas or Cavalier of Thorns, because Teferi is in this deck and it is still very expensive. It was another quiet week over in Modern, with Force of Negation leading a pretty weak crop of gainers. It ticked up almost 5 tickets from 48 up to 53, but that's about it. The only interesting pattern I can deduce is that most of the cards that gained value in Modern this week were from Modern Horizons, with cards like Giver of Runes, Ranger Captain of Eos, Sunbaked Canyon, and Renin 6 all gaining between 2 and 3 tickets apiece. This makes some sense as these cards have a lower supply on MTGO than most other Modern staples, so if you're in the market for any random Modern Horizons cards, you might want to buy in soon. Let's move on now to our biggest losers, where in Pioneer it was Cavalier of Thorns dropping another 10 tickets from 40 down to 30. And the big irony here is that Cavalier of Thorns was actually one of the biggest gainers of the week in Paper Magic, surging $8 from 5 up to 13 due to the card's newfound prominence in mono-green ramp in Pioneer, as well as its continued top-tier performance in standard Simic ramp. But the MTGO price for this card is still recovering from that wild spike up to 60 tickets, so the price is still dropping as it attempts to find equilibrium. My guess now is that Cavalier of Thorns will level off this week, and it might even start to rebound a little. At the very least, even though Cavalier of Thorns is dropping, it has quite a bright future ahead of itself here on MTGO thanks to the amount of Pioneer play it's seeing. Over in Modern, our biggest loser was Oko Thief of Crowns, plunging 12 more tickets from 38 down to 26. This is the cheapest that Oko has ever been, and it comes at a time when the powerful Planeswalker is literally the #1 most played card in all of Modern. I wonder why people could be afraid to buy into Oko right now. In all seriousness, Oko is the biggest reason why the Modern Index is so cheap and slow right now. No one wants to buy into this card because Oko is going to get banned in Modern, and that kind of means that nobody's buying into Modern at all, which means that prices are pretty stupidly low. Heck, even last week's biggest gainers, Mox Opal and Icefang Coatl, gave most of those gains back over the past 7 days. Now, eventually something's gotta give here, and I do expect that thing will be an Oko ban sooner rather than later. But honestly, the Modern Index, it's not going to even start to rebound until Oko is gone. Let's move on to our sneak of the week. And this week's sneak is Questing Beast, which jumped 4 tickets from 10 up to 14. And at first glance, this looks like yet more of the same sort of waffling around that Questing Beast has been doing for months now. It's been kicking around between 7 and 15 tickets, gaining and losing that value every couple of weeks. And perhaps things aren't actually different this time, but I feel like there's reason to expect they might be. Questing Beast has been seeing more and more play in Eternal Magic, showing up in Pioneer decks like Mono Green Devotion, Sultai Midrange, Golgari Soulflayer, and Infinite Possibilities. It also shows up in Modern Banned Snow Control, and even in some builds of Legacy Maverick. And remember, Mythic Rares from current sets? Yeah, they have really high upsides. So Questing Beast might just hit 15 and drop again like it has several times already, but between the plate seeing in Eternal formats and the way its price chart looks right now, I feel like it might be destined for bigger things. As always, we're going to end the week by taking a look at the MTGO Trader's sales data over the past 7 days, and this gives us a really good idea of which cards are selling the best right now on Magic Online, regardless of price increases or decreases. Looking at overall sales by volume, this week was the calm before the storm. Everyone is waiting for Theros Beyond Death to hit the digital shelves, and as a result, the best-selling cards are multi-format all-stars like Fatal Push, Mystical Dispute, and Elvish Mystic. This is what tends to happen right before the release of a new set, and I'd expect a dramatically different list to develop once Theros Beyond Death finally goes on sale. The overall market is going to pick up quite a bit then as well. In terms of overall sales by price, both Teferi Time Raveler and Brazen Borrower have finally edged out Oko Thief of Crowns. Now, this is a big deal, because in previous Oko downturns, the card was still selling well despite the price drop. No longer. People are really out on Oko now, and I wouldn't expect a rebound anytime soon. Unless WotC comes out and says that they're not banning the Simic Planeswalker, which would be nuts, expect its price to continue dropping. It's also interesting to me that Teferi and Brazen Borrower have been selling really well, despite not really increasing in price this week. And my guess is that this relates back to the whole holding pattern thing, where the market just isn't going to move all that much until Theros Beyond Death arrives. So yeah, if you're in the market for either of these cards, I'd grab them fairly soon. I wouldn't be shocked if they start ticking up again next week. And that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again next Monday morning for another episode of This Week in Magic Online Finance.